Hello everyone, welcome to another LIFECAST, and this week we are talking imposter syndrome. Before we get going, we're going to stick to our alcohol-free beer. You're going to the gym.
I know.
I've done my power walk today and me marathon day start training. Neil's doing his 100 press-ups a day, raising money. Donate. Help kicks everywhere. Cheers, mate.
It's funny how we started this. Cheers, Neil. It's funny how we started this podcast and the whole thing was about having beers and discussing. And in the last year, we've gone from having beers to having flavoured water and alcohol-free lager.
That's life. Different goals, different
an evolution,
things.
Isn't it?
So on this one, we've had a few people actually got in touch when I said we were going to be discussing imposter syndrome. And I didn't realise how popular it was. Everyone, I think, has seemed to have some sort of relationship with it, has maybe felt it before. When I looked at it as well, Albert Einstein, even, believe it or not, even spoke about feeling an imposter syndrome. He said that his work, there was other people who had work just as good as his, and he didn't realise what the clamour was about his work. So it's something that clearly everyone, including Albert Einstein and everyone on my Instagram has. I've certainly had bouts of it, but I've seen it on both sides as well. Is it something that you've experienced?
I think everybody experiences it. And what I find in the job that I do, what I find quite funny is, not funny, I can act for people who can perform in front of audiences or in arenas or, you know, in stadiums where they're completely and utterly at home. But then you put them in a different arena. Like I class my work as my arena. So you put them in a boardroom and all of a sudden you see somebody who's an amazing athlete or sports person or entertainer, and all of a sudden you see them become less secure, more vulnerable, maybe more fragile, less confident, because it's an alien environment for them.
Do you think that's a little bit of, what's that kind of phrase where it's, you know, they're on this platform and everyone's saying out, looking up to them with such adulation and all this, that everyone almost believes that they're the complete package, whereas they know themselves that actually they've got their own insecurities like everyone else. And when you take them out of that situation, that's when those insecurities are then there for everyone.
I think when you're talking about those kind of people, they get idolised, don't they?
Yeah. In
reality, if you get to know whoever that individual is that's idolised by so many people, like you became good mates with Jamie Carragher, you know, all of a sudden you understand he's just a human. Yeah.
That was what I was going to say. 'Cause I've kind of got a few different experiences of it, and that is one of them, using him. You know, someone I remember standing when I was, 13, 14, outside the training grounds, hoping he'd sign an autograph for me, and then, 20 years later, I'm having a beer with him. And obviously, when you get to know him, obviously I'm a bit older, you realise he's not quite Superman like I thought he was when I was 14. He is just a normal fella. But I think it's like you say, it's only when you're lucky enough to kind of meet these people that you realise everyone has it. I've had it myself personally when, through the motivational speaking, and at the end, I've had, maybe a standing ovation and people are asking me questions. And what imposter syndrome does for me is it makes me feel guilty, because I'm almost standing there portraying that, I've got it all worked out, and people are saying, well, Andy, what do you do when this happens? And what do you do when life, hits you with a challenge or a setback? How do you cope? Well, the reality is there's been times when I've not coped and things haven't went well. Yet all of a sudden I'm kind of put on this stage and expected to give answers, when really I feel like I'm just winging it half the time myself. And it's really, I feel guilty that I'm almost bestowed with giving this advice, when really I'm thinking, I don't know either, mate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I think everybody has it, because you've just mentioned that there's a point where you're going through a bad time in your life, and there's points where you cope, there's points where there's not as good as well. The same as everybody. But then somebody has to ask you, because you'll have a Q&A afterwards where you've just talked about controllables or what you can deliver. But nobody's perfect at it. You can't behave like what you're telling everybody to do all the time. And I've sat with you before where you've gone, I've got to go and speak tomorrow, and I've got to be inspirational, motivational, and I don't feel like I'm inspiring and motivating myself.
Yeah.
And I think what that comes back to, right, is though it can put you off doing stuff, which we'll talk about in a bit. That's where I think it gets, it's a shame and it's negative and it can stop you doing stuff. And I actually think sometimes you can manipulate that to actually make it.
Well, you think when you've got imposter syndrome, it can hold you back?
Well, I think it does. I think that's one of, if I look at people in life, I think one of the biggest things that holds them back is them feeling like they don't belong doing what they're doing. So they feel uncomfortable, so they move away from the uncomfortable situation. Whereas what I would try and do, not always, because I'm definitely not perfect, right? But I would try and talk about speaking. Like somebody asked me yesterday on LinkedIn, we're doing an event at Concorde in Manchester Airport. Can you speak? And we were doing this podcast today, and truthfully, I think, what the fuck do you want to hear me speak about?
I've heard you say this before, and I still don't understand it now when you say it.
I honestly think, what do you want to hear me speak about?
Yeah.
Now, and sometimes, because of the people I'm around, like I've learned off some like really great people. So like part of me then starts to think, actually, if I tell parts of their story, I've got a story to tell. But it's their story, not my story.
It's a shame that you're diluting your own success, really, aren't you?
But it is what it is, isn't it? I just think when I remember doing a talk once to a recruitment thingy. Can you talk about the growth of your story? And I started it, and I remember looking at the room. I don't know, say 40, 50 people in the room, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing. I'm like telling my story, and why does anybody want to hear that?" And that's an imposter syndrome feeling. By the way, there might have been somebody that didn't want to hear me, but...
Next time Paul starts a story, he's going to go, my mate Andy Grant got blown up.
but so there's loads of times where, and I'll move on to it in a bit, then there'll be times where maybe you get comfortable with, say, speaking, if it's your perspective. But then there'll be times, and there'll be where, but people might say to you, how much is your fee? And I bet there was a time where you thought, I don't know, 500 quid, is it worth 500 quid? Am I worth 100 quid? Am I worth... And somebody will say, oh, such a body's charging 5 grand or 3 grand or 4 grand. And you'll think, yeah, but look at the story they've got. Yeah. No wonder they're getting 3 or 4 grand. If you put that to an audience, the audience would go, well, such a body's charging 3 grand. Andy Grant's charging 3 grand. That's about right. But you look at their story and you escalate.
It happened end of last year. I got asked to go and speak down in the Southwest at a big teachers conference. And they'd used me before a few years back. And obviously my story's changed a bit. And they booked me and I give my fee, which I'm happy with and I was comfortable with. And I went for a beer with them afterwards. And I think he was trying to compliment me, but it kind of come across as, he said, I'll tell you what, you need to up your prices, And I said, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. I feel, it's good. And he said, we had, and he named some Olympian, like, 2 or 3 gold medals or whatever. And said, we had them in. He charged us X amount. Well better than them. And I was like, exactly that. I was thinking, yeah, but that's a name that everyone knows.
Yeah.
I've not been in the Olympics. I've not won gold. I can't do that. But he's saying to me, mate, you're well better than them. And I just, I can't really do that. And I didn't want to, it's a shame. You're right. It held me back from even trying to push the boat out a bit and try and expand my own talk and then maybe raise my price, because I straight away just thought, I can't possibly, I need to stay in my lane. I can't even ever think about doing anything like that on their level just because of that.
Part of me feels like, in reality, it's hard to rationalise how other people see you. You don't actually ever know what people actually genuinely, what they're looking at through their eyes. I think that's quite uncomfortable, actually, because if you knew, then you probably have far more confidence to go on and try more things and see, But I think when you're a kid, I think there's certain things that happen with a kid that put you in your place. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, I will always go back to being a kid on an estate with no money. Whereas in reality, that's where I'm more comfortable, because that's the first however many years of my life. I'm more uncomfortable in places where the more well-to-do or the more well-spoken or the more... Do you get what I mean? I feel like you kind of get a grounding as a kid. If you're not careful, you'll keep going back to being that kid and keep going back to being comfortable. And
Just shy away from those kind of opportunities.
That's the imposter syndrome kicking in because it's uncomfortable. Because I sometimes look around and think, why have I got a story? So you might say, and you'll hear this a million times, I mean, why have I got a story? I'm just a kid from Bootle. You bring yourself back down. Yeah. I'll say, why would anyone want to listen to me? I'm just a lad from Reddish.
I literally say that in my talks as well, like that self-deprecating. Yeah, just kind of, I say, look, I'm just a one-legged lad from Bootle. You know what I mean? But it's even that it's in my head. It's kind of ingrained by you just, one-legged lad from Bootle type thing, which is that in itself, isn't it?
But I think it's a good thing, because I think the key is the balance. Is how do you create a balance? Because what I also come across is people who are bullshitters, and it's like they've lost imposter syndrome, and they're pretending now that they're not what they are, and they're something completely different. And I know which part of the range I'd rather be on. I'd rather be held. Have this
like humble kind of still, like humility.
It gives you humility, doesn't it? Because I think everybody can think imposter syndrome is something that's quite negative. Well, I think it can be quite balancing. I think it's always nice to hear somebody's story of rags to riches.
Stops you getting too ahead of yourself as well, doesn't it?
As long as you don't forget you was once rags. I really don't like being around people who've gone from rags to riches, and you don't see it that often, truthfully, where they then just behave like they're, from a grand estate when they're really from the local estate. And I think that's imposter syndrome, holding or keeping humility, keep giving them an anchor. So I think in that position, that imposter syndrome is bad. I think it's good. I think where it's bad is, it stops you going on stage and being a speaker. There will be people out there who've got a story to tell that can help someone. That don't do it because of it. And that's
sad when you think there's people who maybe have seen a job interview and have thought, I won't even bother putting my CV in because that's too good for me. And you know what's funny as well? I think one of the ways to combat imposter syndrome is to openly talk about it, because I think people will look at you, people maybe have looked at me and thought, no way did they feel it. Clearly we do, like say even Albert Einstein had. And I think the key is, one, to be open and talk about it, understand that it's completely natural. And I think the other way is to just be brave enough to kind of just, jump at that opportunity and just have a go at least. And a little example of that as well, and I really like his podcast. It's a bit outspoken at times, but it's the True Geordie podcast. And I, just after broke the world records, I got to go on his podcast, and it was like, he's had everyone on from Ricky Gervais to Eddie Hearn to Tyson Fury, them all. And you kind of see the setup and you're like, bloody hell, you know what I mean? This is going to be a big podcast. It's millions of subscribers. I went down there and it was this tiny little studio. It didn't look much of a setup, and it kind of gave me the confidence to go, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
But that potentially would have just put me off and thought, oh God, he's on YouTube with all these millions of subscribers. I could never even get anywhere near that.
Yeah.
But I think by actually just having the confidence to go down, and I went on it, went really well, really nice guy, became friends, and he's kind of helped guide me along the way a little bit with some advice. I feel completely okay with having to go and do my own podcast now, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's being able to not be held back by it and not jump at those opportunities that potentially could come your way just because you're so kind of in the mindset of, I can't possibly attempt to replicate what he's done.
Yeah. I think we did a podcast very early on, a LIFECAST on going out of your comfort zone, and it's similar,
yeah.
Really, isn't it? It's holding you back from doing stuff because you're staying in your comfort zone, because you're going, a kid from Bootle should do A, B, C, D, and E, when actually recognising it is the key. I think if you recognise it, then you can make a judgment on whether or not. I was going to say before, I always feel like people think like, they might look at me at the outside and think he knows what he's doing.
Oh, he's got all the answers.
I ain't got a clue what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. I don't even know where I am tomorrow. I'm winging it, right? Now, there's a wall of evidence behind me that gives me that confidence sometimes to go, when I launch something, it tends to work like this. When I do that, it goes like that. Here's the things that I got wrong, but here's a list of things that I also got right. And I kind of use that wall of evidence, if you like. I forget who come up with that phrase. Someone on...
it was off the...
isn't it off the High Performance
yeah,
podcast?
what's his name? Dominic Hughes.
Damien Hughes and Jake Humphries.
Yeah, it's Damien Hughes, I think it was.
I think I've seen it on theirs, and I know Mike Bates uses it. I think he used it on your Next 45 podcast. And I do think it's important sometimes that you do go back to looking at like a wall of evidence to give you the confidence that you can overcome the imposter syndrome.
One of the guys, Peter, who listens to it, he said, you know, he's got imposter syndrome, and he said that everything he's ever tried, he's accomplished, but he still has it. So it's that thing of, at least he's aware of it, and he's got the evidence to say, actually, look, even though I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I've always had success. So it's being aware of it, isn't it?
I also think that the society doesn't help.
Social media.
I just don't think society in general, but even before social media, I think we talk about that a lot now. But in the past, nobody really unfortunately likes to see people do well, do they?
No.
They don't like, the majority of people don't like to see people do well. How many times a year, who does he think he is?
Oh, yeah.
Who does she think she is? What a horrible thing to say. Like, that really means if you ever say that about somebody, it's the biggest compliment ever though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because what you're really saying is, how on earth did that person get from there to there?
Yeah.
Who does he think he is? Yeah. When really you should be like, awesome that guy started there and got to there, or she started there and got to there. But society does bring that imposter syndrome with it.
Oh, 100% adds to it, doesn't it? Like I say, I think it's a natural thing to maybe have it, but I think social media and society definitely add to it. And it's almost that thing, I think, being a speaker and also having the podcast, is you kind of, I know how nice it is if someone comes up and goes, oh, listen to that LIFECAST with you and Paul, really enjoyed that. It's like a massive compliment. Whereas sometimes we're not, as society, we're not so open, are we, with compliments and to say, oh, I enjoyed that. But yeah, people are very quick to say, have you seen what he's up to this week? What else do you think he is? Yeah. So I always make a point to try and say, oh, mate, you're looking well, or, you know, I seen that, what you done, that was good, or how's this? Because I know it can make a big difference with someone. Yeah. You know, it can feel nice, but it 100% adds to it, yeah.
I do think with age, so if there's younger people listening, I do think with age it changes. I feel like what people think about you is more important the younger you are. And I think that starts in classrooms. You want to be a cool kid or a light kid or part of the gang, you want to be popular. And I think that wanting to be popular diminishes as you get older. And particularly when you speak to people who are older than what we are, they don't care less. When you talk to people on the deathbeds, they really don't give a fuck. They genuinely don't give a fuck what anybody's ever thought of them. And I think that links into the imposter syndrome a bit, because I think society can almost force you to not take risks.
Well, yeah, because you're just comparing, aren't you, by going like, oh, I can't even put myself again alongside him because, oh God, I'm nowhere near. And it's just constantly comparing to, yeah, am I as popular? Should I even be hanging around with this person? Am I popular enough for this? And that should I? And it's all on people, your perception on what people think of you.
It is, because if you told the truth about yourself, you'd be very uncomfortable. I don't know, maybe I've never done the exercise, but actually if you stood in the mirror, if you was really down on yourself and you stood in the mirror and said, actually, this is who you are, you'd have to do that where no one could see it, because you'd feel really uncomfortable.
If you were going to tell the whole truth, you mean?
If you were saying, if you were just brutally like, you're kind, you're loving, or whatever those attributes are that you are, you wouldn't say that to someone. You'd feel embarrassed. Yeah. I was with a member of staff yesterday and I had imposter syndrome. I was trying to explain to this member of staff who was in the 20s, right, what I wanted her to do in her 20s. Just go out of her comfort zone, by the way. And she wanted to concentrate on what she was good at. And that's not something that I think you do in your 20s. And what I had to go back to and say, one of the things that bugs me about people's opinion of me, is they might only have seen the last 5 years of me. Whereas I knew myself in my I knew how many books I read, how much studying I did, how much I threw myself in my comfort zone, how many hours on week. I know that the infrastructure that was laid for me now to do a podcast, wear red pants and knock about with celebrity clients. I think some people only see that part.
Yeah.
So it annoys me because that's almost the bullshitty part. And I wanted to drag it right back to, I want to tell you about what I was like when I was 26, but I found it so uncomfortable to explain to her, in truth, how good I was at 26, 27, 28 at my job. Yeah. Not because of anything other. And I had to keep going. It's not because I'm intelligent. It's not because I'm any cleverer than you. I had to keep going over that and drag it back to really, which it probably was anyway. I was as hard work in my 20s as anyone I've ever met. But I always wanted to be
putting yourself
good
down
at something. But I found it so uncomfortable telling another member of my staff how good I was at her age because I did certain things that I now wanted to do. And that's imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's with a member of the team. And it was only yesterday.
It's mad, that is.
So I reckon if we talked about him, yesterday I had 2 bouts of imposter syndrome. One guy asked me to do a talk and I thought, you want to listen to me for? And another girl, I was just trying to explain to her the depth that I wanted to go to build an infrastructure for herself for the future. And to do that, I had to tell her how good I was at her age. And I couldn't even bring myself to do that, which is mental, really.
Yeah. No, don't be afraid to big yourself up. And I think the other thing I want to take from this is the two sides of it as well, how it can be it can hold you back, unfortunately, but also you don't want it to go too far as well, where you start believing your own bullshit and that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I think there's two sides of it that I didn't actually think of before we started speaking, which I thought you pointed out there as well.
Yeah, don't let it hold you back, whatever you do, but don't be afraid of it keeping you back to a degree and keeping that groundedness, because everybody buys into that to a degree as well. You know, if you just go out and just talk about how brilliant you are, nobody really wants to listen to that either, do they? No. They do need to understand the grit, the hardship, the reality, the starting position, the struggles. And I think that does come with a bit of imposter syndrome, so I think it's okay.
Before we end, the only other thing which has struck me, and you know what, as soon as you said it, I thought there's something different about him today. I think this might be the first time I've seen you in like a normal coloured suit.
I know.
What's going on? You feeling okay?
Imposter syndrome. I thought, I can't wear red pants on there.
You can. You look better than colourful than you do black. So. So there you go. Everyone has imposter syndrome, including Paul, twice yesterday. Hope that was valuable to you. As always, keep your suggestions and comments coming in for the next few pods, and we'll see you next week.